The Irish are supposed to be pale-skinned, freckled, with fiery red hair, right? Wrong. That image is only a stereotype. Hidden inside Irish DNA is a mystery so old and so complex that it rewrites what we think we know about Ireland. It's the secret of the Black Irish, and it's not what you've been told. For centuries, people have argued over the meaning of the phrase Black Irish. Some said it was the mark of Spanish shipwreck survivors. Others believed it pointed to ancient outsiders who left their blood behind. In America, it became a badge of pride, or sometimes an insult. But now, modern DNA studies, old shipwreck records, and centuries of folklore are exposing the truth. And the truth is stranger and older than any simple legend. Here's the challenge. The Black Irish don't fit the neat story we're taught. School books say Ireland is Celtic. Then the Vikings came. Then the English. Simple enough. But how do you explain the dark hair, olive skin, and deep brown eyes that show up in Irish families across the island? Where did those features come from? Was it Spanish sailors, ancient farmers, or something else? To answer that, we need to dig through centuries of migration, invasion, and science. Let's start by busting the biggest myth of all, that most Irish people are redheads. Red hair is rare everywhere, even in Ireland. Only about 10% of Irish people have it. That means 9 out of 10 Irish people don't. The most common Irish look is dark brown or black hair. Walk through Galway on a Saturday market day, and you'll see far more dark heads bobbing in the crowd than red ones. Even medieval chroniclers noticed it. Gerald of Wales in the 12th century wrote that many Irish were dark-haired, bold, and quick of wit. The fiery red stereotype is more Hollywood than history. So why did the red hair idea take hold? During the 1800s, cartoons and political drawings in England and America often exaggerated Irish features to mock them. Red hair and freckles became shorthand for Irishness, even though it wasn't common in reality. Over time, the stereotype stuck. But the truth is that Ireland has always been a mix of looks, and darker features are just as authentically Irish as red hair. The most famous story blames the Spanish Armada of 1588. When storms wrecked dozens of ships along Ireland's west coast, survivors swam ashore. Some were captured. Some were executed. But a handful were sheltered by locals. Captain Francisco de Cuellar wrote about his escape through Sligo and Leitrim, hiding in forests, aided by Irish clans. Over time, folklore grew that these Spaniards married into Irish families, leaving dark-haired descendants. Even today, in villages along the wild Atlantic Way, old stories are told of ancestors with Spanish blood. In Donegal, local families say their olive skin came from sailors who never made it home. The tale adds romance, and it gave people a way to explain why their families didn't look like the pale, red-haired stereotype. But DNA science shows it can't be the whole answer. A few hundred men couldn't reshape the looks of an entire nation. To find the deeper answer, scientists tested bones from Ireland's oldest tombs. In 2015, DNA from a 5,000-year-old woman buried at Ballynahatty shocked researchers. Her genes weren't Northern European. They traced back to early farmers from Spain and Portugal. These Neolithic settlers had sailed up the Atlantic coast, bringing sheep, cattle, wheat, and darker features. It wasn't just one migration either. Archaeology shows that for centuries there was steady movement between Ireland and the Atlantic coast of Iberia. Think about that. Long before anyone wrote down Irish myths, before St. Patrick, before castles and Viking raids, Ireland already had strong ties to southern Europe. Olive skin, dark hair, and brown eyes were part of Ireland thousands of years before the Armada, before the Celts, before history itself was written down. 2,000 years later, the Celts arrived. They brought their languages, art, and warrior culture. But genetics shows their arrival wasn't a replacement, it was a blend. The Iberian DNA didn't disappear. Instead, Celtic genes layered on top. The darker traits survived, weaving into Irish identity. Celtic culture left huge marks, stone crosses, bardic poems, epic myths like Cuchulainn. But behind the culture, the DNA tells us that the Black Irish features never needed foreign explanation. They were already embedded in Ireland's oldest layers. So when people today call someone Black Irish, The truth may go back not to Spain in the 1500s, but Spain in the Stone Age. Ireland's story didn't stop there. Vikings raided in the 9th century, burned monasteries, then stayed and built towns. Dublin, Limerick, and Waterford all began as Viking settlements. Their genes show up as blonde hair and blue eyes. Later, the Normans came from France, descendants of Vikings who had already mixed with the French. English settlers followed. Each wave added something new: names, accents, customs, even food. But through all of it, the dark-haired Irish persisted. That tells us the roots of those traits ran too deep to be erased. If Viking and Norman genes could add lighter features, but darker ones remained dominant in so many families, it suggests those genes were already firmly rooted in Ireland's ancient ancestry. Here's where the story widens. Modern Irish DNA shows faint traces of North African and Middle Eastern ancestry. They're small but real. How did they get there? Trade routes. Irish monks traveled across Europe, some reaching Italy and even Jerusalem. Irish mercenaries fought in Spain for centuries, the wild geese armies. Some brought back wives, children, and their genes. There are even medieval records of Moors, North Africans, captured in English wars, brought to Ireland as servants. Others came as merchants, trading in Cork and Limerick ports. Over time, these threads left faint fingerprints in Irish DNA. You might never guess it by looking, but in the genes it's still there. The Black Irish label also clung to certain surnames. Families like O'Donnell, Kelly, and Doyle were often described that way. In parts of Clare and Galway, family lore still insists their ancestors came from Spain. Whether or not it's literally true, the belief shows how deeply the idea of foreign ancestry became woven into identity. In America during the 1800s, Irish immigrants with dark features stood out. Boston newspapers sometimes mocked them as Black Irish. Yet within those communities, the phrase turned into a mark of pride. It meant resilience. It meant survival. Some families even traced their supposed Armada ancestry through oral tradition, passing down the story for generations. The confusion didn't stop there. In 19th century America, some thought Black Irish meant Irish mixed with African ancestry. Others used it to separate Catholic Irish from Protestant settlers. The term shifted depending on who used it. That's why the Black Irish identity feels slippery. It wasn't one fixed group. It was a mix of myth, stereotype, and visible diversity. Even within Ireland, people disagreed. For some, Black Irish simply meant dark-haired Irish. For others, it was tied to specific coastal families. The lack of one solid definition is why the phrase still sparks debate today. Thanks to modern testing, we now know the numbers. Most Irish people carry 10 to 20% ancestry from Iberian farmers. Smaller percentages traced to North Africa and the Near East. These aren't random flukes, they're consistent across the island. The so-called Black Irish are not an isolated mystery group. They're part of the national DNA. When you take a DNA test in Ireland today, the results often show a Celtic-Iberian cluster, proving just how strong those ancient Southern European ties remain. What's amazing is that science is now confirming what folklore hinted at for centuries. Ireland has always been a crossroads, never a closed-off island. And here's the twist: the Black Irish aren't outsiders at all. They're not just descendants of Spanish sailors or victims of old slurs. They're the proof that Ireland has always been connected to the wider world. Every invasion, every trade route, every migration left a mark. The darker Irish families we see today are carrying stories that go back 5,000 years. So what's hidden in Black Irish DNA? Not one neat answer, but a layered story. Ancient Iberian farmers, Celtic warriors, Viking raiders, Norman knights, Spanish sailors, African captives, Irish mercenaries who never came home. Together, they created the genetic patchwork we see today. The Black Irish are not an exception, they are Ireland itself. Proof that no people's history is simple, and every face carries the journeys of the past. When we talk about Irish identity, we're not talking about purity. We're talking about survival, resilience, and connection to the wider world. Subscribe to uncover the hidden stories history left behind.